It is the Final Word Daily. It's the England-Sri Lanka Daily, and it's the third day at Lords. I'm Adam Collins. He's Daniel Norcross. We're both in London for Westfield London and Westfield Stratford City. More extra, less ordinary. And as is the custom on Final Words Daily, Daniel, tell me about the whole day in 30 seconds.
England broke a new record for not giving a tossness by getting out 18 times out of 20 to reckless and crazy dismissals. But it mattered not one jot because they're miles ahead in this game. Really, today was all about Joe Root, as the day before yesterday was all about Joe Root. It's all about numbers. He's become today the first man to score 12,374 runs, take 200 catches and 69 wickets, apart from Jacques Callis. One more catch and he will be truly unique. There was other unique stuff which we will come to, but that's to come. Sri Lanka ended 2 wickets down and they're in a hopeless situation. Bad light came to destroy the day, and I've got a solution to that as well.
Right, so 53 for 2, Sri Lanka. They've got 430 to go for what little it is worth. England were all out 251 in their second innings, and that included a second 100 for the match for Joe Root, 103 from 121 balls. They only batted for 54.3 overs, which, as you say, I mean, some of the dismissals early on, and we'll talk to those, well, at least a couple of them. It just felt like this was the nature of the day. They were going to bat for about 2 sessions regardless, bowled out or declare, and have a dart at Sri Lanka and try and finish it inside 3 days in order to play golf tomorrow. I would imagine big night tonight, golf tomorrow, big night tomorrow night, golf on Monday, because back-to-back tests in London, right? They could have had 2 massive goes, but unfortunately that'll be restricted to 1 massive go and golf on Monday because they're going to have to win this in 4. If the rain doesn't tumble down tomorrow, which is a bit of a side plot here, is that tomorrow could be affected by rain as well. But anyway, let's deal with the main storyline of the day first and foremost. It is Joe Root. Now, more test runs than any batter in England. That was another record chalked off today. He's overtaken Alistair Cook for centuries for England, 33 and 34, both coming in this match. The 200th catch, both catches this afternoon, or this evening rather, were Joe Root at first slip, one from Atkinson and one from Ollie Stone. Lovely bit of bowling there from the latter, which means that he's reached another milestone there. He's only 90 runs away from Alistair Cook for the highest England run scorer in Test cricket. He'll probably get that next week south of the river. Between times, he overtakes Kumar Sangakkara in about 30-odd runs from now. I know, Daniel, you've been keeping an eye on all of these numbers through the course of the summer as he's overtaken about 6 batters on that mark. And I sort of feel like the more we reflect on what Root's been doing in the last couple of years, the fact that he's averaging 61 since giving the captaincy over, I think it's his 9th test ton since then, maybe more than that. That was something Matt Roller had on Twitter. He's 17 centuries away from the all-time mark, 51. It's very unlikely he'll get to that. But if he were to end up getting the aggregate, which is 3,500 runs away, and if he were to play 200 test matches, which is 55 matches from here away, it is not outside the realms of possibility. Joe Root playing 200 test matches could get Tendulkar for tons as well, which I didn't think was remotely possible a couple of years ago when there was this, I guess, air quotes, conversion problem, which is turned around entirely in the last 4 years.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the conversion problem. It's amazing. Before 2020, or up to 2020, he scored 17 tons. I think he'd got 48 50s. Since then, he scored 17 tons and a further 15 50s. So he's now converting at over 50%, which is absolutely crazy.
Which I think 2 players all time, right? It's Yunus Khan, and for those who have made a certain number of hundreds, it's only Yunus Khan, I think Michael Clark, and of course Bradman, forever the outlier, who've had that statistical quirk about them. I mean, it's only a small sample size in the context of a 12-year test career, but it's been by some margin his most productive on that measure as well.
It is. I mean, it's got sort of little hints of Jimmy Anderson to it, hasn't it? In that he seems to be getting better as he gets older. And also, there's a little bit of the methinks he doth protest too much as well, because you remember all the kerfuffle with the reverse swept rampy get out to Jasprit Bumrah.
Yes.
And this was, the way I play. And the idea was that if we do that at this point with Ashwin off and Jadeja hobbling and Mukesh Kumar as one of the bowlers, then that would put enormous pressure on India. Well, it didn't work like that, did it? But much like it didn't work when England holed out to a series of catches at Lords in the second Ashes test last year when Lyon limped off. Actually, what seems to have happened since then is that Root has put that away. I don't think he's hit a 6 since then. There are some amazing stats. He'd hit 19 sixes under Bazball and not hit one since that occasion. He'd only hit something like 17 sixes in his entire career up to 2020. So you're looking at a very different kind of Joe Root. And since he's put that away, he's been scoring at a decent lick, the same sort of lick as he always has done, around about 58 runs per 100 balls. He's suddenly scoring more hundreds. He's completely in control of his game. We have to caveat that by saying that, look, he's had 5 test matches against West Indies and Sri Lanka in home conditions, in conditions he knows really well, against sides that, I'm not disrespecting them, they're not as good as India and Australia. But, he's got more test runs against India than pretty much anyone. So his record is fine against He's only got really one blot on his copybook, which is a failure to get 100 down under, which could change next year, the way he's playing at the moment. He's got a slight issue, I think, with the fact that his strength is a big weakness in Australia, the late dab and the playing the ball down to third and getting his runs, like just getting easy singles that way. Doesn't work quite as well against Cummins and Hazelwood on Australian decks, but putting that aside, he's basically the complete cricketer at the moment. The catches is also something worthy of note. I mean, 200 catches is a lot of catches. There's only 2 players above him now. He's level with Callis. I think it's only Dravid and Jayawardene ahead. The most number of catches in Test cricket is 210. Yeah. I mean, he's going to get that. And you question whether or not he can get to 50 Test centuries or 51. Well, he's got 17 in the last 4 years. Now, in those last 4 years, England have played India multiple times, home and away. They played many Test matches against India, home and away, one of the best sides in the world. They've played Australia at home and away. So he's going to go through a very almost identical cycle, if you like, over the next 4 years. So I think there's every chance that he could get there. There's every chance he could get up to Tendulkar. And he says he's not motivated by numbers, but I think he's motivated by runs, and he seems to be thoroughly enjoying it. And I think he's actually found a balance to his game now, which has come from a bit of reflection. People talk a lot about how he played at the beginning of Bazball, and some of that, I think, was generously buying into what Ben Stokes wanted England to do. And when you're the ex-captain, you've got a couple of options, haven't you? Like sulk, retire, and then the third option is to go, I'll do exactly what you want, boss. And I think in a way he might have just done a bit too much of what he thought Stokes wanted. And now he's had time to think about it and realised that actually what Stokes wants is for him to score like 100 after 100 after 100, which does perfectly well for England.
Well, that's right. And what you said before about it being a softer summer, it's true. I mean, of course, we wish that Sri Lanka and the Windies were more competitive in these conditions and they were able to really push England. It'd be terrific if this was a series that was 1-1 going to the Oval. That was never likely, nor was it likely that the Windies series was going to end with any other scoreline other than 3-0. And I know that they took a test off Australia as recently as February. That was wonderful, but it was an outlier and it was recognised accordingly. Australia have bullied the Windies for years, and the fact that they got one back in Brisbane was a wonderful thing that we all celebrated, but it wasn't to be expected. So Root should be making the runs here. And there is a borderline obsession in some quarters about his lack of century in the column in Australia, and that's fair enough. I get that. That's perfectly reasonable to focus on, but it doesn't diminish the player he's been around the world in conditions at home, of course, but away too. The run he went on in Asia in 21, late 21, early 22, or was it late 20, early 21, whatever it was now,
21.
in Sri Lanka and in India as well at the start of that series. So I think that's a wonderful thing that he can look forward to, that he can go to Australia and have, in all probability, his final series there with a lot riding on it for his legacy. That's a great position for him to be in, going into that, not having the burden of captaincy, which he had the last 2 times they were there, both times when they were seriously outmatched, and in the 21-22 context, a dreadful series on every front, owing to the ridiculous circumstances they were played in. I say ridiculous, I mean unprecedented circumstances with lockdowns and invasive COVID tests every day and all of that kind of thing. So anyway, putting Joe Root to one side, and England's innings was as good as Root looked. The rest of it was, I mean, if I were the fielding captain with England batting in the second innings, I would do 2 tokenistic overs of two slips in a gully before immediately reverting to the five-man back strategy because they're going to take them on. You know that they're going to try and hit sixes anyway. This isn't the first innings of a match where it's within the realms of possibility they'll try and set it up. They were so far ahead in the game. It was always about getting to bat for a couple of sessions here, having chosen not to enforce a follow-on last night. There's no reason not to do what they did on this corresponding day, I should say, of the Ashes Test last year against Australia when we had the bouncer wars from both teams. Well, Sri Lanka had every right to move to that as soon as they did. I think it was over number 19 when Ollie Pope, first ball of it, was caught in the deep when they just went to it, and that made it 69 for 3. And there was no real jeopardy. They were already a mile ahead in the game. But, I wish that, I don't know what you think, Daniel, but, you've played loads of cricket, so have I. It feels like nobody gives their wickets away in real life the way that some England players give their wickets away. My kingdom for a player to give a dismissal like that away, the ball after I've changed the field, it doesn't happen in real life, but it does happen when this England team are batting, especially in the second innings when it's all about getting to the finish line as quickly as possible and ideally, in their case, playing golf on Sunday and Monday.
Yeah, it sort of slightly irritates me, in part because I have had to sit through, and I don't mean this as a fan, I mean this as a watcher of cricket.
Yeah.
I have had to sit through Australia routinely not enforcing the follow-on with a 220-run lead, and then in the third innings, go on at a decent 4.2 and over, but for a long period of time, and to keep their opponents, not just England, every opponent. In New Zealand, I remember them being particularly cruel to a few years back, where they would get into these powerful positions. And the point of not enforcing the follow-on is not just because you might lose if you do enforce the follow-on, vanishingly rare though it is, as happened to you done. It's actually the kind of mental disintegration, and it's the exhaustion, because England play against Sri Lanka at the Oval again next week.
Yeah.
So it's a good tactic. You get them to bowl, and you don't have to declare by tea or get all out. What you can actually do when there's 3 days left in the game is you can set yourself to bat till lunch on the fourth day. And that is so demoralizing. It's so horrible for the opponent that they've really got nothing left. And we've seen Australia do it time and time and time again. Whereas actually when you play England, you go, they're not going to enforce the follow, but they won't keep us out there for more than 3.5 hours. We'll get some more wickets. It'll actually boost our average. There was only Root there who was actually playing the classic Aussie innings, albeit that it was one of his fastest hundreds, if not his fastest.
I think it was his fastest.
I think it was, his fastest 100. But that's take that off the table because he's playing a totally different level of cricket from anybody else in the match at the moment. I just thought, if you're Harry Brook, and if you're Ollie Pope, there's 100 here for the taking against a demoralised, exhausted Sri Lankan attack. Just get it. And then, forget the golf, or just declare an hour into tomorrow. There's so many different ways of being cruel in a game of cricket. And I do think that England aren't sufficiently cruel. I think they're a bit Buddhist. I think it's all about truth for them and kindliness and necessity. I think they could do with being just completely more sadist. Although what that does do is the commentators sound very happy. I was listening to quite a bit on the radio as well as watching on the TV. And as the wickets fall, there's a kind of, we're going to get a fifth day off. Absolutely, definitely. So look, they're everybody's friend, but they're their opponent's friends as well. I just, sweet, lovely, nice of them, but why? Cause more pain.
Yeah, get off the Headspace app in the morning. You don't need to meditate that often. It's going to be okay. And look, I'm being a bit, I'm obviously referencing golf and taking the piss a little bit here, but I'm sure that wouldn't have been in the thinking of the acting captain, Ollie Pope. And look, caveat here, I am Team Pope. I am Team Ollie Pope. I don't think he'll end up being the long-term England captain. I don't think it'll end up working that way. I think we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago on the longer show that Stokes' career is likely now to take him to a point where Harry Brook might take over, and it might be one of those ones where most of all Pope is the vice captain, and that's fine, and batting number 3 ideally from England's perspective. But that was a day to be ruthless, and the first moment they set the field back, he was anything but, and it ends up an absolutely ugly dismissal, making room and getting caught at deep point. It's one of those that reflects, or look, if you're writing the Ollie Popes in shit Nick line or story, you were given a beautiful vignette or a beautiful example to start your piece, and it doesn't mean anything, really. Ultimately, I doubt he reads those articles anyway. I don't think many of them do, but it does add to a drumbeat, which over time can wear down on a player. I was interviewing Andy Caddick yesterday as part of the 150th anniversary celebrations at Clevedon Cricket Club, his cricket club that he played at when he was qualifying for Somerset all those years ago, and he's still involved at the club now with his son. And he was like, yeah, when I first started playing for England, there was an enormous amount of media pressure, and it did take a toll on him over time. And I think it probably still is how he reflects on having played. And I'm not saying that it's quite the same these days, but with the viciousness of the media maybe not quite being as much as it was back then. But Pope has, or maybe social media might be taking over on that front, but Pope has today had the chance to bat for a couple of hours and put all that to bed, and instead at the first available opportunity played a very low-risk shot and found himself walking off for 17.
Yeah, I think about this in a couple of different ways, which is one, the old way, which is why did he do that? Unbelievable. Why did he do that? Because here was an opportunity. Field set back, bat on ball, play yourself into form. Excuse me. The other side of that is that maybe it hints at a very healthy dressing room and a very healthy culture. That really it doesn't matter, you know. Like, Ollie Pope knows he's going to be number 3, and he knows he's not going to be captain when England go to Pakistan. He's kind of caretaking a role and trying to engender the same attitude as Stokes. You remember when Stokes first was captain under Bazball? He got out in abysmal ways at Lords, and it was almost pour encourager les autres. It was almost like he had to get out really badly to make everybody else feel, oh, it's okay if I screw up. And in a sense, he was sort of like maintaining the royal tradition handed down from Stokes. Come on, find a really dumbass way to go. Yeah, I know. Caught cutting at point. I mean, that's a deep point. Deep point. With everybody back.
With the first ball after they've all gone back, like telegraphing the punch, yeah.
With all the time in the world.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Part of me actually thinks it might be quite healthy that that's a situation. And maybe it's what Ollie Pope needs. I mean, I think there's a general consensus that captaincy doesn't necessarily suit him, and that, you know, he's a lovely fellow who thinks a lot about his game, and to have to think about everybody else's game as well is a cruel and unusual punishment for such a reflective chap. And I think he's just getting through it. He's going to get through the 3 games. He is the vice captain. And just the same way as Dan Lawrence has been made to open the batting, and everyone's going, oh, there's going to be concerns about Dan Lawrence. I don't think there's any concerns about Dan Lawrence in the England camp, because they've got him as a spare batter in the middle order. They lost their opener, and they said, do you mind? It's a bit like a village team on tour. You know, the opener goes down with a broken finger, and the guy who normally biffs it at number 6 goes, yeah, I'll open. No, don't worry, I'll open. That'll be fine. And it's only a test match at Lords. You know?
Yeah.
And I think we probably take things too seriously, and also because we got journalistic hats on, I kind of thinking about all those stories. But maybe what you're actually seeing is a dressing room environment that isn't that fussed by those kind of ancillary worries, and just gets on with, like, this is us, this is our group of lads, this is how we got to play the game, and we're just going to get on with it. And we're going to win. If we win, who gives a shit who got what? You know, there's a bit of that.
Yeah, and look, the same could be said if we want to have a conversation about Brooke. Brooke could have set up for bed and breakfast, but got caught on the right at deep mid-wicket off Joe Surya. And Chris Wokes, who, again, it was an ugly dismissal. He was out slapping with almost 1 foot off the pitch, trying to make that much room for himself. But it didn't matter, all told, because they made 251 after making 427. The 2 wickets sort of fallen for Sri Lanka. Both were sort of fishing outside the line of the off stump. Atkinson gets Madhushanka again. Atkinson always getting himself in the book, as Zolt said last night with Cam. He's never not taken a twofer in Test cricket, so you'd be sure that he'll add to his 1 overnight tomorrow. And then Patham Nissanka out to Ollie Stone. I thought this was a lovely bit of bowling, setting him up outside the line and then bringing one. Well, it wasn't bringing one back off the seam quite so much as having the wobble seam full stop and being able to send down a wobble seam delivery with far more bounce. And I'm thrilled for Ollie Stone. Just wanted to mark a moment for him here in the podcast, that we've heard about the horrible injuries that set him back for such a long stretch of time. Nick Friend documented that on the Cricketer website, in the magazine as well, how close he was to not being able to do this anymore, having being a test bowler, looking like he was going to be the real deal, and then feeling like, well, my whole world's been taken away. I reckon it's great that he's gotten back here. That wicket was at 86 mile an hour. Yeah, it's not 96 mile an hour. It's not Jofra Archer pace, but it's lively. The difference between 86 and 81 is considerable. All professional batters say that. And he's doing it at the first time of asking, having returned to the test teams. He's already in the book as well before bad light stopped play. That was a funny one too, where they went off because they didn't want to bowl the spinners. And as Owen Morgan was saying on television, any bowler to the Sri Lankans when it's as dark as that would have maybe been worth considering going on with for Ollie Pope. But I suppose, as you said before, they've got so much time in the game, they can freshen up and go again tomorrow with the quicks when they're permitted to do so.
Well, yeah, and also you don't want the ball getting any softer unnecessarily. You know, I think the one thing I think was a shame was we didn't see Dan Lawrence bowl because he has taken a lot of wickets. We've seen him take a lot of wickets early on. He's got a really weird action, and if it's dark, the idea of bowling spinners is that, you know, they're not as dangerous. You can see it easily, etc. But he's got such a weird action that coming in the gloom, that would be really spooky and freaky. So I would have gone for a bit of Dan Lawrence. But I want to give you a stat. I want to give you a stat.
Well, I want to hear your bad light thing after. You mentioned you got a bad light solution. I think it might be the same one we've advanced before, but give me Stone first.
I'll give you Stone first because he was the wicket. He was England's sixth bowler, right? And he took a wicket. He is the earliest sixth bowler to take a wicket for England in the history of Test cricket. It might even be a world record. I don't know. I need to double check that, but certainly for England, in the 14th over he came on because of the bad light. So Bashir and Root had come on and whatnot, and he was the fourth seamer deployed, which is an absolutely beautiful stat. And you know, the record he beat was set by Alan Lamb at Calcutta in 1984 in one of the most boring, turgid games of cricket ever took place. Interesting only because India had dropped Kapil Dev because they didn't like the way he got out. I mean, talk about a different world. In the second test, he the greatest all-rounder India has ever produced was out caught in the boundary once, so they dropped him. Then India batted for 3 days. Phil Edmonds famously read the paper upside down while sitting on the outfield at one point in the match because he was so unbelievably bored. And Alan Lamb came on to bowl in the third innings. You know, England had saved the follow-on. They had to fulfil the contractually obliged hours. Alan Lamb comes in, does a kind of Bob Willis impersonation, takes a wicket. He was Beautiful. The earliest. Before that, Ollie Stone has beaten it. As for bad light, it's a simple solution. I first recommended it when England played against the West Indies at Headingley, and that would either be 2017, I think. And I was on commentary with Graham Swan, and they got off a bad light, and England had just played a day-night test match against West Indies at Edgbaston. And cricket was doing its usual thing. Oh, what is it? How does anybody understand it? We probably need to introduce a whole new competition where you count down from 100 because otherwise people just won't understand cricket. And all this was being mooted. And I said, well, do you know, how confusing must it be for somebody getting into cricket that last week they played in darkness, actual darkness with the floodlights on. And then the next week you're coming to watch it. Let's say the first game you watched was the week before. The next game you watch, it's light and the lights are on and they come off the bad light. What the hell's going on here, Swanee? I said, and I did this with great trepidation. I said, surely they should just replace the red ball with a pink ball of the same age and play under the lights. And I expected him to poo-poo it. He said, do you know what? That's obviously what they should do. Like the players acknowledged, I was listening to the radio today, Alistair Cook acknowledges that a number of times he went off for bad light, was taken off a bad light. And he thought, actually, I don't see a problem here at all. There's nothing dangerous here at all for me. I mean, the point is that it's not just the batter. The umpires might start to find it a bit more difficult. The ball's smashed back at them at great speed or something like that. They're a bit older. Maybe their reaction times aren't as good. But generally speaking, the solution is just get the goddamn pink ball, give it to England, and give England a 14-over-old pink ball. And do you know what would happen? They'd be playing golf tomorrow.
Well, you don't need to convince me. I think the first time I wrote a column arguing that was also in 2017. So I think you and I have been aligned on this for a long time.
Yeah, exactly the same trigger. Yeah.
The same argument, the same concept there as well. And I occasionally tweet about this when they go off a bad light. And I I don't think that it's reasonable for us to sit there and go, oh, it's a fucking disgrace. They should be playing. And, it's not that dark. And, they've played it. That's not really our place. They're professional cricketers. There are guidelines that have been developed and processes in place for this. It shouldn't be discretionary. It should be done based on, the way they do things for a reason, right? So I don't get too caught up in whether some players or some pundits think it's good enough to go on. What I do think is that, as you say yourself, there is a solution there. Now, is there an adjustment to be made to a pink ball in a situation like this evening? There absolutely is, but there's an adjustment whenever the ball changes. Is the degree of difficulty for the batting team then, does it go up a little bit? It does, but as it did at Edgbaston last year when we were there for that mini session where Australia took 2 wickets in 2 overs before they went off for rain. Like, this is a volatile part of the game, and if you're unlucky to be batting at that time against a pink ball, well, anyway, I don't think either of you or I need any more convincing that this is something they should at the very least consider and see whether it's something the players might accept and the administrators could crack on with it. Anyway, Daniel, we're going to take a pause and we're going to return with the final word, Hall of Fame. Final Word Daily, Adam Collins, Daniel Norcross, and we are here for Westfield, London and Westfield, Stratford City. All right. Just like Billy Madison and Thornton Mellon in the first 10 minutes of their respective films, it's almost time to go back to school. Okay. And while your beloved offspring's school experience will likely lack the hijinks of an academic decathlon of competitive diving, it doesn't need to lack style. I think that I remember the Billy Madison reference. That's I think the bad guy in that's played by Bradley Whitford, who went on to play Josh Lyman. Anyway, he was a versatile actor. Great in Handmaid's Tale as well, which I know you're a Handmaid's Tale.
Big fan
Guy too. Visit the Citroen pop-up at Westfield, London this weekend and discover the intersection of understated style even, and eco-friendly consumption with reusable lunchboxes, food storage containers, and water bottles, all made from recycled plastic. No matter what people tell you, being cool in school does matter. The confluence of style and sustainability is a first-class ticket to social capital now and for the rest of their lives. Westfield, London, don't your children deserve the best? So just repeating the key bit of information there. Citroen, it's a pop-up at Westfield, London this weekend. This is going out on Saturday evening, so you can go there tomorrow. And if there's only a little bit of cricket, you've got the afternoon to go down to Westfield, London. That's the one in Shepherd's Bush. They are most extra. They are more extra, and indeed they're less ordinary. Daniel, we haven't spoken about some weird dismissals. They might make Hall of Fame. I don't know what else from you. You go first.
Well, I'm going to give you the weirdest of the dismissals because I know you loved it because I received a message from you. And as I watched it, I entirely concurred that it was indeed the craziest thing imaginable. I really liked the drop. There was a wonderfully easy drop at deep mid-wicket off Harry Brook. And what I loved most about it was that he was clearly giving catching practice, but actually literally. It got up and it dropped. He went, okay, I'll do it again. And just as part of the general theme of the day, which was an extraordinary generosity, I did feel that this was a moment of farcical cricket that could only happen now, could only happen with this team. And actually, I find it lovable. I'm not going to be critical. I'm going to embrace it because we've watched this game. I've been watching it now for 48 years. And for 46 years, I had a fairly good idea of what every team did. And it's produced some pretty miserable bastards, actually, who sit in commentary boxes saying, why are they doing it exactly like we used to do? And I kind of like to think that the next generation of commentators that come out of this basketball team are going to be completely loopy. And Harry Brook exemplified that with this wonderful farcical period of cricket, which I applaud him for.
So we saw, the two fun dismissals. Let's deal with Ben Duckett's first. So this was the one that, because you often see Tavares Miller. I sat next to Chris Tavares' brother at that aforementioned lunch that I went to yesterday down at Cleveland. Jeremy Tavares, lovely man, academic down at Bristol, loved his company. And I mentioned that, the Tavares Miller juggle in the slips comes up, all the time on commentary, right? Whenever there's one of those. But this was a different kind of one because it went to gully. And it was like steered from gully to second slip where Angelo Matthews did the rest to get rid of Duckett. So that's not something you see too often where it goes all the way to gully, then balloons all the way back to second slip. But it was almost like he pushed it in his direction when he realised he couldn't catch it. It was so clever.
Yeah. I mean, it had a sort of almost Gordon Banksian quality against Brazil. There was a sort of there was Handa's paw, and paw is a paw plate. It was like a paw plate. It was gorgeous, and it was almost there was something kind of undemonstrative about it as well. Just chunk chunk, throw up in the air, done, bit of a smile, you know.
There's another link back to this thing. So Nigel Martin was the other person who was there with Andy Caddick yesterday. He wicket kept. Yes, and of course he was the England goalkeeper for different periods of time in the 90s and 2000s. Anyway, moving on. And the Gus Atkinson caught it, let's call it fly slip, in front of the pavilion, in front of the MCC gate. I mean, that is just, again, it was it's kind of the Glenn Maxwellian reverse hook that we saw him play against the Dutch last year in the World Cup. But instead of middling it, it came off a top edge and went straight to the man at, I guess, a conventional fly slip for when you're trying to play the ramp. Fucked if I know how it gets down there anyway. It does, and it goes straight down his throat. Beautiful stuff.
Can I just say very briefly on that it is the most un-Gus Atkinson thing he's ever done in his career, his England career, by which I mean he has been a model of intensity and introspection and thought. I love the way that after he bowls every ball, he then walks back and stares at the ground and he comes in. I love the fact that when he celebrated his 100 yesterday, his arms went up in the air briefly, thought, oh no, that's a bit much, and put everything back down again. The fact that he's been so sort of gentle and shy and, in interviews. And then yesterday he got the 100 and I heard something different in his voice when he was talking to Henry Moran in the interview he gave. And there was something kind of like he was laughing at himself. He was actually laughing. And he said he laughed. He got back into the changing room after he got out and he sat down and laughed. And Gus Atkinson is not a man who gives the impression of taking cricket unseriously. And I kind of first felt today that shot, he earned that shot. There was a sort of joy that has come bursting through his body. He didn't have it when he got 12 wickets in the first game. You'd think that would be it. Instead, he just looked a bit shell-shocked. Then I interviewed him when he was player of the series. It was like, I don't quite know what the fuck's going on here. I'm a player of the series. Then, in the very next game, he scores one of the genuinely greatest hundreds ever made at Lord's. And that's why he's perfectly entitled not just to play the reverse hook, but to get it 180 degrees behind. But at 12 o'clock, isn't it? I guess that's where you're looking at it. Perfectly to a guy 1 yard inside the boundary. If he hadn't been there, it would have been 6. He's living his very best life.
It's well put, and you can add to that tomorrow when England try and finish it off. Last bit of Hall of Fame. It's not really Hall of Fame, just a little happy birthday to Caroline Swan. Saw Caroline downstairs today at the bottom of the media centre at lunch. She was there with Amelia and Debs, and a few of the other Final Word crew were there at Lord's today. But Caroline's been a wonderful force for good in our wider Final Word community over the last, I don't know how many years now. But happy birthday to her. I'm glad she enjoyed it in the Edrich stand. All right, that's us done. Final Word Daily is for Westfield, London, Westfield, Stratford City. Daniel, thanks for being with us. I think you're back again tomorrow with Cam from memory. Probably Cam. It's not me because I'm playing cricket. As I tend to do on a Sunday. But that's okay because the game will finish tomorrow and we'll have another podcast and one after that and one after that and there'll be another one after that as well because we are the Final Word and we can't stop and we won't stop. Good night.
Good night.